Hello everybody and welcome to our fourth class on the Irish parliamentary traditions in Ireland during the 19th century. We're going to continue where we left off in the last class where we were looking at Daniel O'Connell, but as always we start today's class by looking at our learning outcomes. By the end of today's class you should all know what Home Rule was and how the Home Rule Party came into being. Secondly, you should know how Charles Stewart Parnell became an important member of the Home Rule Party. And thirdly, you should know the reaction to obstructionism and what the new departure was. Well, we've seen at the end of the last class how O'Connell was set out to appeal the Act of Union and he wanted to obstruct it. Now, we also seen that after O'Connell's death, we've seen the Young Irelanders had their own rebellion of 1848. Now, remember that this is during the famine era, so they had their own rebellion that was launched, but it was a failed attempt. Another failed rebellion was the Fenian Rebellion of 1867. Now, this rebellion was organised by the IRB, or the Irish Republican Brotherhood. Now, the Irish Republican Brotherhood is a very important part of our Irish history, as they later evolved into the IRA after the War of Independence. Now, the IRB was founded by James Stevenson in 1858. So James Stevenson would have been the founder of the Irish Republican Brotherhood. Their sister organisation was founded in America and they were also known as the Fenians. So you would have probably heard of the Fenian Brothers or the Fenian Brotherhood. And here is a poster of the time of the Fenian Brotherhood. Now, this was any Americans that had left or emigrated from Ireland during the famine. They would have set up the Fenian Brotherhood, and this would have been the movement in America for support and for funds to try help gain Ireland's independence. Now, it's important to note that the IRB wanted to find freedom, and they thought the only way to seek freedom was through physical force. So as you'll remember, O'Connell's way was passive, and he always thought of peaceful protesting and using his political stance through government, while the IRB was more of a physical force, that they seen that fighting was the only way to gain England's respect and for them to take note of them. However, after the failed rebellion of 1867, the Fenians reorganised themselves in America and they renamed themselves the Clan na Gael. Now, this rebellion was unsuccessful, and it was mainly unsuccessful due to British spies that helped end the rebellion. So, as you'll remember from our other rebellions, it was usually down to the fact that Britain had spies that infiltrated the information before it could get out. Now, the end of the rebellion was sparked by by the Manchester Martyrs. These were three men that were trying to do a jailbreak and to to help free one of their comrades out of a British jail for killing an officer with a stray bullet. Now, this ended up with the men getting caught and executed. Now, they went down, or they were known as the Manchester Martyrs. Now, prior to the Fenian Rebellion, a lawyer by the name of Isaac Butt was known for his sympathies and for his support of the Fenian and the Irish Republican Brotherhood. Now, he had gone out and said that he supported them and he supported what they stood for. And in 1870, he organised a new association called Home Rule. Now, Home Rule was very, very similar to what O'Connell was fighting for, where he tried to repeal the Act of Union, but Home Rule was a small bit different in the way it was set up. Home Rule meant setting up a parliamentary in Ireland that basically was in charge of internal affairs. Now, by internal affairs, I mean education or infrastructure. So, for instance, Ireland would be able to control its education and control how they set up laws or buildings or any planning permission or rules such as infrastructure, but any external things such as trade or going to war would be under the control of England still. So Isaac seen it important that England still had some connection to Ireland, but Home Rule essentially meant that we could create our own rules that would affect our own country. Now, Home Rule was a very, very loose organisation at the time. It wasn't really definite in the direction it wanted to take. So it was more of an umbrella organisation that all different people that wanted to break away from England could join in under. So it attracted different members of diverse communities such as the IRB or the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and members such as landlords. So as you'll remember back at the time, landlords were predominantly Protestant, but a lot of them wanted control to be brought back into Ireland so it wouldn't be under the control of English laws. This would have meant that landlords would have had a lot more push and pull with how things could be done in their own country. One such landlord was Charles Stewart Parnell. Now you'll probably recognise this name because he's a very important Irish figure. Now Parnell was a Protestant landowner in Wicklow, and he owned a property called Amerdale. Now he was elected as an MP for Meath in 1875, and he declared, which was very important at the time, he declared that the Manchester Martyrs were not criminals. So we can kind of see that he was supporting the Irish, even though he was Protestant, and he was declaring that their movement wasn't such a bad thing, and he didn't see them as murderers or as criminals. He understood that it was a stray bullet that had killed one of the police officers. Which is one of the most important parts, is that he used his policy of obstruction in Parliament to cause havoc within Westminster, which we'll be looking at next. So obstruction was a tactical approach that politicians used within Westminster, and this was to obstruct any dealings within Westminster. Now we can see here in the cartoon reenactment of the British understanding of what obstruction was. You can see the train was, say, what the agenda of the day. You can see the politicians that are trying to drive the train down the track, and here was a depiction of the Irish government, or the Irish people representing Ireland, obstructing the course of action. So that kind of gives you an idea of how they viewed it. Now this tactic was introduced by Joseph Biggar, and obstruction was any business or bills being enacted in Westminster by making speeches for hours without stopping, so nothing could be done. So one of the most well noted of these cases was where 7 Irish politicians obstructed Parliament for 22 hours straight. It was like a relay race where one after another would get up and make a speech about what needs to be done in Ireland, and this held up Parliament. So instead of having a Parliament that might last 4 hours of the day's discussion, now Parliament was taking 24 hours just discussing matters that were happening in Ireland. And as you can imagine, this would drive most politicians mad. Now, why did the Irish politicians obstruct, or why did they form obstruction? This was mainly for 2 separate reasons. One was to annoy or basically aggravate them into giving the Irish their own parliament so that they wouldn't be taking up any of the English time or taking up any of Westminster's valuable time. Secondly, it was to highlight how the British policies were obstructing the Irish business. So it was showing that Irish or British politicians were totally avoiding or not listening to the Irish business that needed to be done. So they were the 2 main reasons why they were obstructing the Parliament. Now there was a lot of different types of opinion of obstruction. So the 2 main different opinions was that Isaac Butt disliked the tactic of obstruction as he felt it was too confrontational, and he felt like it wouldn't lead the British into giving Ireland their own parliament. And secondly, it caught the attention of the leader of the Clan Gael, John John Devoy. Sorry, I was about to say John Denver. It caught the attention of John Devoy, who basically was a Fenian, and he was exiled from Ireland after being arrested and sent to America. And there he had set up the Clan na Gael, or the Brotherhood over there of Fenians. And this was very, very important that he had showed his support for Parnell, and this was mainly due to the fact that Parnell announced in Parliament that he didn't think the Manchester Martyrs were guilty. So this led to a lot of support from John Devoy. Now, this was very, very important at the time that Parnell had the support of John Devoy over in America. This was important for a few different reasons. It was important that they both had the knowledge, so that Denver had, or Devoy had the knowledge to support Parnell and to give him new ideas, but also the backing of the money that was coming in from America. So as you remember, Ireland at the time was a very, very poor country, and it was crucial the money that was being able to be sent back from America. So the money was able to fund attempts to escape British control. And as you'll remember, that the Fenians, so lots of people that were actually willing to pay money and support the Irish, had a deep hatred over the British rule and the British control over Ireland. So John Devoy had actually changed his opinion of how Ireland could fight for their freedom prior to learning about Parnell's approach to Irish freedom. He seen that physical violence was the only way to gain Irish freedom. Now, after reading up about Parnell and seeing how his movement was moving forward, he had changed how the Clan na Gael had viewed its way of gaining freedom, or sorry, how they thought Ireland was going to gain freedom, and he marked this as calling it a new departure. Now, this was when Clan na Gael seen that Ireland could seek freedom through both using physical force and political agenda. Okay, so this was basically him seeing that Ireland could or seek freedom not only through violence but also through politics. And this was very important as it marked a divide between different opinions, and it was one of the first times that we started seeing different opinions breaking up between the IRB and the Clan na Gael. Now, the IRB still rejected that they could seek freedom from England through political agendas or political means, and they only seen that physical violence was the only way. Now, with this support of the Clan na Gael, Parnell was elected as leader of the Home Rule Confederation of Great Britain. Now, this was still headed by Isaac Butt, as we can see here in the back, but it's important to know that Parnell was elected as one of the main leaders. Now, this wasn't to be so successful as they had started their campaign in the west part of Ireland, which, as we know, was affected greatly by the Great Famine, which we'll be looking at in our next class. So by now you should all know what Home Rule was and how the Home Rule Party came into being. You should also know how Charles Stewart Parnell became an important member of the Home Rule Party. And thirdly, you should all know the reaction, or you should know what the reaction of obstructionism was and what the new departure was. Okay guys, I hope this helped. Best of luck.